Welcome back to another programming video. Today's topic is parameters and return values. We're looking at functions and reusability. Python is our programming language of choice. And without wasting further time, let's jump straight into it. Now, VS Code is my IDE of choice. Feel free to use any other platform that you feel comfortable using and that you are able to practice what it is that we are looking at today. Now, like I said, we're looking at parameters. In my previous video, I described how to go about creating a simple function and using the keyword def or def or definition for short, I believe, and then giving your function any name and just following the same pattern as this one. And then don't forget the indentation and then add what it is that you want the function to do. And the function, they do one thing well, and it can be called at any time and within as your code flows from top to bottom. Now, in this case, based on this previous example, we are going to be using a parameter. Now, the parameter name here is getName, and what I want to do is I want to bring as much from the previous videos that we've covered as possible to kind of have an indirect revision on the things that we've already touched, and then see how we can kind of challenge our mind again to remember them and then practice them flawlessly and until they become very like second nature. So here I've brought in the input again. So basically what's happening is I've created a parameter. So before I even carry on, so I'm just gonna kind of define what it is when we're talking about parameters. Think of it as a placeholder, something that you intend on passing or communicating, and you're just creating a placeholder for it. Now there are further advanced ways to go about making sure that it's always the right format, the right type, but we're not going to dive into that. So this is basically high level introduction, and like I said, if you're looking for something more in-depth, this is probably not going to work for you. In that case, I'll recommend like paid courses or where they go into more details about how to go about implementing this kind of functions and advanced stuff. But this is just basic, just to help someone who hasn't doesn't have a coding background but heard about Python and maybe is interested in maybe learning or considering learning, and then just don't want to deal with the whole complex logic and syntaxes and all that kind of stuff. And Python just, in my view, helps a great deal to kind of approach programming without making the syntaxes being a stumbling block. As you can see, some of the terminologies that I use for the code are like your day-to-day words like returning, definition, get, those kind of simple terminology that you're already familiar with, and then just using them for programming makes things easier. And then once you've gotten to a level where you kind of feel very comfortable, you got the principles, you got the basics, and it's easier to kind of navigate at your own pace and move into other programming languages that you feel comfortable and you would like to learn. All right, so now I've created a placeholder, and that's a parameter, and the placeholder is basically a name. So I'm gonna call this name, basically name. So that's a placeholder. It has and I want to do something with that. So now that's a placeholder. So this function expect a value name and it can be any. That's what you see, parameter name. Any means it's not specific. It's not a string. It's not a integer. It's not a float. It's just a value. So it's just a placeholder. So now if you want to be very specific, I think the way you go about doing that, if I'm not mistaken, is to do something along those lines. And you can see if you hover over it, it actually tells you that I'm expecting a parameter a value of type string. So now that's a bit too far for now, so let's just stick to the basics. So it's expecting anything, so whatever you pass, I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna say hello, and I'm gonna add the value that I want to add at the end of this. So there's also something while we're here that I also want to show there. Another way you can go about writing this, I remember I've been using that in the past, so I might as well stick to that. So you can go and write it this way, and basically what you get is you put name there. This is another way of writing what I've written there. Either you use a string plus and a name, which is basically concatenating, meaning you adding a string to another string and you just put the two together, or you can just write this way, where you have a letter F and then you open and close quotes, and then you add your string, and then you can also open close curly braces and pass in the value of your parameter that you want to print after that. And we're gonna run this, and you're gonna see that we're gonna get the kind of the same output basically. Now, like I said, I'm bringing in the input, and just a refresher, input is basically prompt you as a user to enter a value, and then we can use that value when we call the function. We use that value and we pass it to the function, and the function will process it and do whatever it is that we want it to do. So that's basically the whole flow. And yes, the name, the value, the placeholder name that we given to greet is different from what is being passed here. And that's simple because if you look at it, we have a variable that we created that is getting the value of the name, and that value or that variable is what we pass into greet. Now, when we're calling the greet function, the value that's been passed, or the variable that's been passed, doesn't have to be the same name as what the placeholder of the greet function is. So that's just something you will notice. So you can have a variable here that's called surname, and here it's just going to be name. It doesn't matter. So the value that you're passing is still going to be outputted or processed as intended. So now let me run that. I'm going to say Python, say enter your name. I'm going to say Bob, and I'm going to enter that. As you can see, we're getting hello Bob, hello Bob. That's because we have written it in two ways. So, and you can see the output is basically the same. So depending on your use case, or you feel it's not too much to have it this way, then go for it. If you're comfortable using the F sign, open close bracket and curly braces, then go for it. So whichever way, you're still gonna get the output. Now, and we're using input here. We get the value, Bob is being passed, and then grade is being called, and that's basically what you get at the end of the day. Now, we've looked at it. Now we're gonna use another case. In this case, we are dealing with the return values. Now, what I mean by return value is that the function, which is in this case is add, is not just doing something. Remember, in this case, we are passing the value and it's doing something, and nothing's being returned. Now, if I hover over this, you can see that the function is defined and returning something calling any. Any means it's not specific, although there is a way you can go about specifying that, and that's how you do that. You can see, well, I'm probably returning a string, and if you hover over that, you can see that it say, okay, you should expect a string from this number. So, but We're not going to do that in this case. We're going to keep it simple. Just return anything that's given to you. I'm going to process it. Now, placeholders, I have a letter A and a letter B. And these are the two placeholders. That's how you go about passing in multiple placeholders or parameters. And you can have as many as possible depending on your use case. Now here you see that I have the word return. Simple, your day-to-day same English word return, nothing extra. You know, if I'm typing that, anything that comes after return is what will be returned. So this is my function, and this is a short version of the following. Assuming you do something like this, where you have an A plus a B, and you want the sum, and you put it there. So, and that is how basically. So we're skipping steps. So we're removing the sum here, this redundancy, and then we're just passing in the A plus B and asking Python to do that processing behind the scene and just return the result. Now, when calling the function, we are basically doing this, right? But then if you just run the code without doing anything here, so let's give it a try. Not that, no. So if we do, here we go. If we run that again, you can see that the nothing has been done. Although the code was run, as a matter of fact, I can just prove to you that the code was run. Print A. We're just gonna put that there just to show you that we actually run the code. But you can see that because something has been returned, nothing has been done. And I can even go ahead and say, let's do that. Let's practice while we're here. So we have a F and we have that, and we're going to do this. So we're going to run that code one more time. You can see we have an 8, but that's because we are printing the value of the sum of the two parameters A plus B. Now what we want is to be able to, because that value has been returned but it's not been handled, so we want to do is take the result, get the value that's been returned. That's how you go about catching that. So think of it as a goalkeeper. So you have a goalkeeper here and we have the players. So the player has played and the ball has been kicked back to the goalkeeper, and there has to be someone who catches it. So, and then the result is basically our variable that does the catching. So now we know that the value will be returned, the value will be 8, and we want a way to display that. So we take the value, pass it in here, and we print. That's another way also of about how you can go by writing the same value as what we've seen before. So you can have a print, comma separated, and pass the value on the other side, and Python does the magic behind the scenes. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna write sum is, so, and we're gonna leave it there. So now we're gonna run that Python, and you can see sum is without the comma, so that's not needed. So you can run that, sum is 8. So that's what you can see. So that is how you go about doing a return. And obviously there are many ways you can implement this, things that you want to do, or maybe stuff that you want to add, or you want a function to call another function. That's possible. So it all depends on you. So I hope you've learned something new. Until next time, keep well. Bye-bye.